The sun was barely up when Marcus raised the sledgehammer over his shoulder and brought it down hard on the edge of the old concrete pool. The crack was loud, sharp, and final. Bits of broken cement scattered across the dry grass as he kept swinging, his muscles tense, sweat already clinging to his shirt. Each hit sent another piece of his past flying into the dirt. He didn't stop to think. He just wanted it gone. Every curve of that pool reminded him of a life that didn't exist anymore. Across the fence, Karen stood still. Her freshly dyed hair pulled tight, one arm crossed while the other held her phone. She wasn't even pretending to be subtle. Her lips curled into a pleased little smirk as she spoke loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Yes, officer. He's tearing up his yard with no safety signs or permits. I'm not sure it's even legal." Marcus heard every word. He just didn't care. Not yet. He didn't even look at her. The noise of concrete breaking was louder than her voice, and honestly, that's what he wanted. She'd been annoying for years, always measuring grass, peeking through blinds. But this time, she had no idea what she was stepping into. Marcus stood still for a moment, the sledgehammer hanging by his side, breathing hard as dust settled around him. The broken pool didn't look like much now, just sharp edges and scattered cement. But to him, it used to be everything. That pool was where his daughter, Sophia, learned to swim, where her laughter used to bounce off the fence as she splashed and called out for him to watch her dive. She was 8 when they filled it for the first time. Back then, life felt full, normal. Now it was all gone. The divorce had hit like a slow wreck. Papers, lawyers, silence. In the end, they agreed on every other weekend. But lately, his ex, Elena, started making excuses. "The pool's not safe," she said on the phone. "What if something happens and you're not watching?" He wanted to argue, but her voice was sharp and cold, and somewhere deep down, he already knew the real reason. She didn't trust him anymore. Or maybe she didn't want Sophia around him at all, so he stopped waiting for permission. He started tearing the pool out with his bare hands and borrowed tools. No permits, no plan, just raw feeling. His therapist had said something weeks ago that stuck in his head. Anger is just grief wearing a mask. He didn't understand it then. But now, swinging a sledgehammer into the past, he got it. He wasn't mad at the pool. He was just trying to feel in control of something, anything, again. A knock at the door broke through the noise of Marcus's thoughts. He wiped his hands on his jeans, still dusty from the demolition, and walked through the house that felt way too quiet without Sophia's sneakers by the door or her crayon drawings on the fridge. When he looked through the peephole, he saw a young police officer standing on the porch, her face calm but serious. Behind her, by the curb, stood Karen. Arms crossed, lips tight, phone still in hand like she was proud of something. "Are you Marcus Rivera?" the officer asked, flipping open a small notepad. Her name tag read, "Rodriguez." "Yeah," he said, stepping outside. "I'm responding to a complaint about property destruction. Do you have permits for the demolition work you're doing?" Before Marcus could answer, Karen jumped in like it was her moment to shine. "He's been tearing up that pool for days. No warning signs, no fencing, chunks of concrete flying into my yard. I have grandkids that play over here. It's a hazard." Marcus kept his voice steady. "It's my property. I'm taking down an old pool." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Even so, if it's major demolition, the city usually requires permits, especially with heavy tools involved." That's when it hit him. He hadn't filed anything. He hadn't even thought about it. Karen saw the hesitation in his face and smiled just a little. Not kind. Smug. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. And just like that, Marcus felt the edge of control slipping from his hands. Marcus sat on the edge of his torn-up patio, the officer's words still ringing in his head. Karen had walked off with that same smug look, like she'd won something. For a second, the old anger started to bubble up, but this time he didn't let it take over. He took a breath, pulled out his phone, and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he hadn't called in over a year, Jimmy Castellanos. Jimmy answered on the second ring, voice rough like gravel. "Well, look who finally remembered I exist." Marcus gave a tired laugh. "I need a favor." Jimmy had been his mentor back when Marcus first got into construction. The guy was short, built like a rock, and didn't mess around. If something needed fixing or someone needed to be put in their place, Jimmy was the guy you called. Back in the day, Marcus had spent years working as a construction foreman. He knew every rule, every loophole, every permit line the city had. He'd just forgotten that knowledge in the middle of his pain. But now he was ready to use it. "I've got a neighbor problem," Marcus said. Jimmy didn't miss a beat. "All right, let's handle it right." The next morning, Jimmy pulled into Marcus's driveway at sunrise, his white pickup rumbling loud enough to wake the whole block. He stepped out with a coffee in one hand and a surveyor's kit in the other. "Let's see what we're working with," he said, already moving towards the fence. Marcus followed him out, feeling a small flicker of something he hadn't felt in a while. Control. They started at the back corner of the yard. Jimmy measured slowly, carefully, calling out numbers and jotting them down. After about 15 minutes, he looked up with a low whistle. "Son of a... She's got almost 2 feet of her fence on your side. That's about 22 inches into your property." Marcus nodded. "Keep going. There's more." Jimmy moved on to the deck. He took one look, measured the distance from the edge to the property line, and let out a quiet laugh. "This thing's breaking setback rules. City says 5 feet minimum from the line. She's way under that." By now, Karen had noticed. She stood at her kitchen window, pretending not to watch, but the curtains kept twitching. A few minutes later, she came outside, hugging her arms and trying to sound casual. "What exactly are you doing?" she asked. Jimmy didn't even look up. "Verifying the property line." Karen stayed close after that, trailing behind them, asking questions, taking pictures, trying to stay calm. But her voice had changed. No more confidence, just nerves. She was starting to feel it, and Marcus could see it in her eyes. A few days later, Marcus was sipping his coffee when he saw the first city truck pull up outside. Then a second, then a third. One inspector headed straight to Karen's yard. Another walked up his driveway with a clipboard and a smile. "Mr. Rivera, I'm here about your workshop permit." Marcus nodded calmly. Right on time. Across the fence, chaos had already started. Karen was in her backyard with a man in a hard hat, clearly a city inspector, who was pointing at her fence, her deck, even her shed. Karen's voice was sharp and panicked, but the inspector just kept writing. A few minutes later, her husband, Bob, pulled into the driveway, tie half loosened, face red. He stomped into the backyard and started arguing with the inspector, his voice rising with every sentence. Jimmy had reported everything. The deck was too close to the line. The fence crossed into Marcus's yard. The shed was way off code. The air conditioner was installed too close to a boundary wall. Even the mailbox was sitting 6 inches into city property. One violation after another. And just when Karen thought it couldn't get worse, another inspector rang her doorbell. This one for noise and neighborhood notification. Turns out, Marcus's new workshop permit triggered full environmental and zoning checks. All legal, all perfectly timed. Marcus stood in his yard, going over building plans with the city planner while Karen's world started to crumble behind him. For once, he didn't have to raise his voice. The city was doing all the talking for him. It was just after noon when Marcus heard soft footsteps on his driveway. He looked up to see Karen standing there, arms crossed tightly, her face pale and eyes red like she hadn't slept. She didn't have that stiff, proud look anymore. Her voice was low, shaky. "Marcus, can we talk?" He set down his tools and nodded. "Go ahead." "I know I messed up," she said, barely able to look him in the eye. "I called the police. It was me. I thought—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I didn't think it would get this bad." She told him the city was hitting them with fines they couldn't afford. Bob was furious. The tension at home was boiling over. She looked more scared than angry now, like someone who'd finally realized how far she'd pushed. "Please," she whispered. "I'm asking you not to file anything else. No more complaints. We can fix what they already found, but we can't handle more." Marcus took a breath. He kept his voice steady. "I won't dig up anything new, but what's already been filed, that stays." Karen nodded slowly, eyes glassy. She didn't argue. She just stood there for a moment, then turned and walked back toward her house. Quiet, small, and nothing like the woman who once smiled while calling the cops on him. A few days later, Marcus saw Karen standing by the fence again. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at the dirt where the pool used to be. He didn't offer a greeting. He let the silence stretch until she finally spoke. "So, you're really going through with the workshop?" Marcus nodded. "Construction starts Monday, 7 a.m. sharp." Her eyes dropped to the ground. She already knew what that meant. 16 feet of solid wall right along the property line. Her garden would be in the shade for most of the day. The sun she used to brag about catching in the mornings? Gone. She didn't argue this time. No sharp comments, no fake concern, just quiet breathing and tired eyes. Marcus took a step closer and spoke just loud enough for her to hear. "Next time you feel like calling the cops on someone, maybe make sure your own backyard's in order first." Karen didn't respond. She just nodded slightly, turned around, and walked back to her house like she was carrying something heavy. And Marcus watched her go, not angry anymore. Just done. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his notes, and opened a folder labeled Phase 3. There were still a few things left to take care of.